freeze on. Oh.
Do you have something on the computer screen
Yeah.
and you hit the picture mute? Push it again. There it is. Okay.
This face, a lot of us have probably seen this face, and not a lot of us know what it really means. Although it is common knowledge he was a revolutionary and he stood up for some people in Cuba, it is not really taken into account what he actually stood for and his true ideology behind his actions and the meaning of the revolution. So today, I am going to give you a more complete image of what this guy did. So, yes, he was a revolutionary. He was a communist. He even described himself as a Marxist-Leninist, and he had a strong opinion when it came to communism. He would lay down his life for it. According to Harris R. Richard, a historian specializing in Latin American history, specifically Cuba, he clearly stated that he fought long and hard against it. He ultimately went to Cuba because of the dictatorship of Batista, who then was president of Cuba and was actually supported by the US, because he would run almost a complete dictatorship, keeping people in sugar mills and not really paying them enough, almost in slavery. Che and Fidel Castro were leading an attack on Cuba on November 30 of 1956. It was a battle that was a key battle that had a pivotal point in what would be the fall of Batista's dictatorship. The amount of willpower it took to lead an entire revolution just to stress the ideology behind something is great. And not only did Che lead it, he also fought in battle, and he had even sustained some injuries and has gotten shot himself numerous times, but survived. And in a speech that he was invited to by the UN, in the General Assembly of the UN, he himself claimed, "We have declared ourselves to be within the group of non-aligned countries, although we are Marxist-Leninists, because the non-aligned countries like ourselves fight imperialism." From a young age, he had already read a number of books by this guy. Okay. That guy. Karl Marx. He had been only 16 and he had already read a lot of books of Karl Marx. Now, if you've probably read Karl Marx, he's not very easy to read. He's very complicated, and I've tried so myself, and it makes no sense to me, and it's kind of like in, if you like to call, almost riddles, but he already read so by the age of 16, so that made him quite intellectually gifted, and that's what ultimately led him to believe what he believed, and he also believed that all communist countries should be more aligned with each other. He was proud of his ideology and he laid his life down for it. He was also best known for his revolutionary nature, but the lesser known facts are what made him to the person that he became. Che was actually a doctor from Argentina and was actually somewhat from a wealthy family. His parents, mainly his mom, were free-thinking intellectuals that always had something to say, especially when it came to politics. He also was very athletic and liked rugby, and he also suffered from asthma. His family came from all over Latin America. His mom was from Mexico and his dad was an architect in Argentina. He was raised well, and his mom always taught him and read him books, and that's what ultimately led to him being what he was. Because of his middle class, he went to good school and went to medical school and could afford to do so. and that's where he received his medical training. But when he went to medical school, he would see that the world was not exactly very nice. So he set out on an adventure, and he traveled 4,000 miles with his motorcycle, which would be that. Because he saw some bad stuff in the hospitals, he wanted to see the entire world, and he just left on motorcycle one day and traveled all of that on motorcycle. That's when he met a bunch of people that also had the same ideology, and he found that he was not alone. And now that he was that, the famous picture was taken of him, the one I showed the first one, and that became what was actually more known than what his actual revolution was known for. The image of his face had become way more iconic than his legacy, and now people are wearing them in shirts, even though they have no idea what he actually stands for and what he fought for. The person who took that picture, his name was Alberto Diaz or Corda, and that was what he was actually known for. And Smirnoff Vodka tried to use this image for their new vodka, I guess, and Corda actually sued Smirnoff and won. So it's now that his face is now copyrighted, which is something very against what he was stood for, which is capitalism. And now his face has been copyrighted. It should be taken into account that although his image is everywhere, what he represents should not be ignored. As a communist Argentinian, he was an outcast, and that's why a lot of people didn't like having his image around, but everyone else did. So, in a sense, he's a type of style, a thing that you could become, something that you can now buy, which is not what he stood for at all. He was a revolutionary and changed the government structure of Cuba. He was a well-educated doctor that had asthma and was still very much athletic. Although he was proud communist, he still believed in the people, which actually were the people who didn't really know what he stood for. And hopefully this example will set the standard for generations.
All right, Nicole, since Evan's not here, why don't you tell us what you thought?
Okay, so I thought the information was good. You had a lot of information and a lot of things that we didn't know. I think the thing you could improve on would be just identifying what you were talking about. You didn't really introduce who you were talking about. It was just kind of expected that we knew. And but other than that, I thought you had really good information and you had a lot of it, and you were telling us things that we didn't necessarily know. And I think that's what you set out for in your thesis, so that was
I thought the face image that is so iconic was a pretty reasonable attention device at the beginning of the speech. It identifies what the subject is, although you don't name him until a couple of minutes into the speech, and then it's only kind of in passing when you put him in with Castro as part of that discussion about the revolution in Cuba. So it did seem like it was a little bit hesitant to step forward and say what it is you're talking about here. I did think that you identified a goal for the speech, and to clarify why the image is iconic and to provide some background on that particular subject. So that was okay. Why we're listening to it, though, I think is not as clear as it needs to be, and the way it's going to develop, there needs to be a lot more structure. I didn't hear a preview that I would describe as being helpful in the presentation. You need something a lot stronger than that. There's information about different parts of his life, which is fine, but I think that we miss a chronology. We've got him in Cuba at one point, then the next thing we know, we've got him driving all over South America, on a motorbike, and then we're hearing a little bit about his growing up period and him reading, and it's not exactly clear why all of this information, how all this information is supposed to be put together. It seems like if you're going to do a biographical kind of presentation, it would make sense to organize it chronologically so it's easy to follow, and then tie it into the main reason that he's known is his participation in the Cuban Revolution. You kind of have that a little bit backwards. It sometimes is dry when you're presenting the material. It's like you're struggling to remember what it was that you're trying to say and why it's interesting. You don't sound particularly, I don't want to say you sound indifferent, but it's not invigorating, it's not exciting, and I don't know that you're adding enough to it to make it interesting. There are bits and pieces of data, but they seem like it's a review that is without a sense of why it exists in the first place. I did like the irony of the image being copyrighted and being used in a way that seems antithetical to his beliefs. I need a little bit more explanation of what his beliefs were. That he describes himself as a Marxist-Leninist. Well, what does that consist of? I think you explained. Heck, he read Karl Marx, and Karl Marx is hard to read because it doesn't make much sense. So why is it good that he believes in something that doesn't make a lot of sense? And how is it important? I think there needed to be a little bit more explanation of that. Che is also a controversial figure, so I do think that ignoring some of the controversy is a little bit problematic. There are as many people who find his image being used the way it is reprehensible as those who find it admirable, and kind of ignoring that. What's the old saying? History is written by the winners, I guess, as they say, until years later when people get to do the revisions. I heard stories about Columbus the other day. Columbus is a hero for 500 years until, maybe 30 years ago, and they say, nope, he's a horrible human being, and here are all the horrible, awful things he did. And, we've got the same sort of thing that's going on here. It's great to know he's a revolutionary for the people, but, of course, he also did a lot of pretty horrible, miserable things. So, I think people need a little bit more context, and it's unlikely that the people in your audience are going to know all of that stuff. So I think you need to give it a little bit more context there. A lot of reading, a lot of looking off, and I don't remember this being your topic when we cleared all the purpose statements, because we'd have had a little bit more discussion about it. It's you can change your topic. I'm not, but it feels again like we spent time and energy working on stuff, and then people just decided, let's throw out that 2 or 3 weeks worth of work and move on to something else.